Hi, Bob Moog here from UG Studios, and I'm here with Richard Gottlieb, an old and good friend who runs Global Toy Experts. And we're going to talk about what Richard does and about the industry.
Well, first of all, it's really nice to be here, and I'm really excited by this concept you have here of broadcasting 24 hours about games. I think it's really cool.
Well, we're hoping that we can do a global thing, and so for one of our very first pieces of content in February of 2020, having a global toy expert is appropriate if we're creating a global toy network.
There you go. Well, let me just say that one of the things I've written about, and I have a magazine, Global Toy News, and podcasted about, the Playground Podcast, is the fact that we are moving from being a toy industry to really an entertainment industry. And you see like what Hasbro has done in terms of incorporating television, movies, and all these platforms to tell our story. And so I think what you're doing here is that move towards to be successful in the toy industry is to be really realizing that you're in the entertainment business.
Well, thank you for that. The way we got there was we looked at the consumer and we said, how is today's 18 to 30-year-old different than 18 to 30 or 35-year-olds 20 years ago?
In so many ways.
Very many ways. And so by looking at that, we said if we want to communicate with those people who are today's young mothers and fathers, we have to be able to do it through mobile and by online. And we want to do something, just as a lot of what you do is for the industry. Your whole career, as I've seen it, is making the pie bigger.
That's right.
And
thank you.
That's what I see.
I'm glad you saw that.
Yeah. And we want to try to do that with this. And so we're hoping that people will enjoy these interviews because they're able to meet people they would not normally get to meet. One of the things I was going to ask you was, when you think about your business, global, where are the places where you think there'll be the most toy activity or most opportunities over the next 5 years? What markets?
Well, I have been tracking China very closely, the Chinese domestic market. I think it's a fascinating figure that there's 650 cities in China with a population of over 1 million.
Nobody knows that.
Right. And I looked at the U.S., and this is not, of course, counting the suburbs and stuff, but we only have 10.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives you two things: the magnitude of the opportunity, but also the sheer magnitude of the opportunity.
Right.
What you have to overcome. And so I think it's going to be the place for growth. I know we're having some tough times for China right now.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get past it. And that this is a huge population. It wants to play.
Mm-hmm.
And that has some very strong retail stores. Toys R Us China is quite large. I think it's around 400 stores.
It's getting bigger every year.
Great stores.
Mm-hmm.
Kids Land is the largest bricks and mortar toy retailer in China.
One of the things that I have been really confused by as a manufacturer is you can't, and I always tell people this from Europe, when they try to use the population game where they say our country is 20 million and you're 340 million, so you should be selling 15 times more than us. You don't want to be doing that with China because they don't have a culture of playing games or playing toys the way that we do. Do you see that changing?
Yes,
Yeah.
I think they love games.
Yeah.
And they love American and Western brands.
Mm-hmm.
They are emerging very much as a consumer society. And they don't want to have a lot of children anymore because they want to have money to spend on themselves. Get a lot like us.
Yeah.
So I think that that's the number one opportunity that I see. But I will tell anyone who's thinking about doing this, don't do it yourself. Make absolutely sure you have all your intellectual property protections in place before you go in there. And initially, at least, I would recommend using a distributor.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah, who knows the country and knows the market. Because the idea is not just to enter China, but to enter safely.
Yeah, and you can. Their attitudes about intellectual property are different than in the U.S. and in Europe, and so you do need to make sure you're protected.
Yes, there is no history of intellectual property protection in China. However, because there are some very large homegrown entertainment and toy companies now, they want to protect their intellectual property. So it's not like it was before, and we were bringing IP there. Now they have their own.
Yeah.
And so the protections are stronger.
When you think about the world you operate in, which is toys and games,
Right.
do you also do video games, or do you cover that?
We are knowledgeable of video games, but we are not in our wheelhouse. We are more of a traditional play.
And
company.
what percentage of what you write about and what you consult on is games versus toys? You ever think about it that
Well,
way?
yeah, it's fine. I never put a percentage to it.
Yeah.
I'd say 20-25% is about games.
Mhm.
I find games fascinating.
Mhm.
I think they're incredibly important tools of socialization in a world which too much kind of tries to connect digitally. You know, the American Library Association was encouraging libraries to have games because libraries are one of the last public spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And if you put a game on a table, people of different ages, races, nationalities can sit together and play.
Mm-hmm.
And so games are very important.
Yeah. Well, we certainly think so. We've been spending a lot of time for 35 years working on games.
Can I just go back 1 minute
Yeah.
to what I think? This is not going to be in the next 5 years, but I am fascinated by Nigeria,
Mm-hmm.
which has, I believe, it's the 30th largest GDP in the world.
Yes.
And I think it's the 8th largest population.
Really?
And by 2050, 2075, something, they're going to be second to China in population.
They also have some kind of serious banking issues because I'm always getting emails from people from Nigeria having a lot of money they want to put in my bank account.
It's funny, you know, we unfortunately know of Nigeria that way, but it's a thriving economy. And here's why I bring this up. I don't know anything about Africa. Do you?
I know South Africa.
South
That's
Africa,
it.
but other than that,
And
of
Zimbabwe.
course,
Zimbabwe.
in the northern tier, you know, the more Arab countries.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that there are millions and millions and millions of people there, and we know nothing.
No.
And if you know something, contact me. I want to talk to you.
No, that's great. I mean, it's interesting. What about India? What do you see happening in India that has a lot of people too?
Well, yeah, it's a little bit of a concern
Mhm.
because India has just announced tariffs on toys and games and other things. And this is kind of startling because this is a country that was trying to be more internationalist in its relations.
Mhm.
And it's troubling. And we know that countries that do have a lot of tariffs and that sort of thing in place, they don't do as well.
So do you think India, I don't know the politics of this, but would India put tariffs in place to support local manufacturing?
Yes, that's why they're doing it.
So if what they're trying to do is they're trying to say to Hasbro and they're trying to say to Mattel and people like that, if you want to sell in India, you got to make it in India.
I think that's a
Yeah.
big part of it.
Which is a little different than just supporting local companies that want to grow.
And if you really think about it,
It's a different kind of protective
it's
tariff.
aggressive towards China.
Yeah.
But I would remind everybody of the fact that China does do 86% of the world's toys, and there is no one ready to take that on.
Right.
It's not.
No one can handle the volume.
China originally got the business because they were the low price provider. Now they have the business because they have an unduplicatable infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. No, that's exactly
And
right.
if you're thinking about moving your business to Vietnam only has so many people and so much
Right.
capacity.
Yeah, but if University Games moves its business and no one else does, we'll be okay.
Then you'll be fine.
Now, what were you doing before you did this?
I held various management positions. I used to be at Western Publishing Company,
Oh,
which was
sure.
at one time one of the second or third largest toy company.
Yeah, it
We
was
made
probably
golden
third largest.
books and
Yeah.
puzzles, and I was.
Were you there when they did the games?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it was a great training ground.
Mhm.
I learned an enormous amount of management when I was there. But I find that I just like working for me.
Yeah.
And so I've been consulting with toy companies since 1994.
Yeah, I was going to say, because Catico, you were there a long time ago.
Yeah.
That was a long
It was in the 19th century, I
Yeah.
think. When I was in Catico.
And you like working for you?
I wore a derby hat.
When you work for yourself, do you like the boss better than when you worked
I love
at
that
Western
guy.
Publishing? You love that guy. Yeah.
I love that guy.
And he's fair to you? Compensates you fairly?
He's reasonably.
Reasonably.
So.
Depends on how things are going
Makes
with
me
the
get
business.
up early,
Yeah. It can be
But
tough.
it's a wonderful, liberating freedom, a feeling, I think, to work for yourself. It's scary. I had a person ask me one time, and you can relate to this, and say, well, I guess if you work for yourself, you work harder than anybody else.
Yeah.
And I said, well, no. I said, anybody can work hard. I said, you wake up 3 o'clock in the morning scared to death.
Right.
That's the difference.
When you work for yourself, it's not working hard. It's just being preoccupied and anxious all the time.
All the time. And it becomes,
there is no
it's
holiday.
like a person with heartburn who never takes any medication
Right.
for it. They just learn to live with it.
Uh-huh.
And it's the same thing. And so you learn to live with anxiety.
Yeah. But you're doing okay. You're managing.
I love it.
You're
I
managing.
love it. And
What's next for your company? What are your goals and what are you trying to do over the next couple of years?
we are doing a lot of mergers and acquisitions.
I was going to say, I didn't mention that earlier, you're a place people can go if they want to buy a company in the toy industry or if they want to sell a company in the toy industry.
We work with IP holders. We're currently working with the NFL Players Association. They have us working with women's United States soccer team, with the WNBA Players Association.
That's great.
So we do a lot of intellectual property, and
you're doing the podcast too.
we do the podcast with Chris Byrne, the toy guy, and I write, and it's just every day is different.
Yeah, it's just great.
It keeps me very excited and stimulated.
I'm really excited to see what you do next, because the people that don't know you or aren't familiar with what you're doing should look and read the blog or the newsletter, because it's so good.
It's www.globaltoynews.com, and the podcast is the Playground Podcast, and globaltoyexperts.com. Yeah.
And on the Playground Podcast, you're doing kind of what we're doing here, but you're doing it as a podcast.
Correct.
Yeah. And you're talking to interesting people, and you're going longer. We go about 10 minutes.
Yeah, no, we run about half an hour.
You run deep. You
go
go deep. You go
deep.
deep. So anyway,
tough question.
I hope you'll come back again.
I love
we
it.
can hear what you're doing, and anyway, any ideas you have or thoughts on how we can build the community, we would love to hear them.
Well, I'd like to actually write about that.
Okay,
so
that
if
would
you
be great.
will give me some information, we would love to talk. We could even talk to us on a podcast.
Okay, that's a deal. Thank you.
What would be fun is record part of a podcast.
Oh, that would be really great.
Thanks for watching and happy gaming. If you found this video helpful, go ahead, give it a like. And while you're at it, go ahead and subscribe to our channel to make sure you're on top of the latest videos and content from your friends at UG Studios. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.